Imagine a world where adult diapers outsell baby ones. That's the reality in Japan. Or where there are more pet dogs than children, like in Spain, or a place where more people die each year than are born, which is true for over a third of the states in the US. These facts might sound dystopian, but they describe the world we live in today, and it's just the beginning. Humanity is staring down the barrel of below replacement fertility, with many countries well past that point, but most people have no idea it's happening. So what's really going on? What does it mean for our social structures, our economy, and our daily lives? And most importantly, is there anything we can do about it? For decades, experts warned about overpopulation. Predictions of mass famines, energy shortages, and ecological disasters dominated headlines. And honestly, who could blame them? The world population was around 3 billion in 1960, and today we've surpassed 8, an increase which has reshaped our planet in many ways. Yet beneath the surface, a different trend was quietly unfolding. Over the past 60 years, the global fertility rate has more than halved. Although some regions still have fertility rate above replacement levels, the downward trend has touched every major region on Earth, and now the consequences are beginning to emerge. It's worth noting that falling birth rates aren't entirely unexpected. To understand why, we need to look at historical fertility and population trends. While precise fertility rates from the past are hard to determine, estimates suggest that until the Industrial Revolution, fertility rates ranged from 4.5 to 7.5 children per woman, significantly higher than today's 2.3 children per woman. Despite these high birth rates, from 10,000 BC to 1700, population growth was only around 0.4% annually, due to extremely high mortality rates that balanced out the high fertility. The population boom since the Industrial Revolution was driven primarily by a drastic decline in mortality, not an increase in births. Essentially, humanity transitioned from an era of high mortality and high fertility to one of low mortality and low fertility, and it was precisely the lag between these shifts that led to the rapid population growth we had seen. What isn't expected is just how far the fertility rate has fallen. Replacement fertility, the average number of children a woman needs to have to replace the population, is around 2.1 children per woman. Africa is now the only continent where the rate is above that. Countries like Taiwan, South Korea, and Singapore are all in the midst of extreme fertility collapse, all being below one child per woman. The obvious result is population decline. For example, at the current rate, over 50% of the South Korean population will disappear by the end of the century. That's within the lifetime of many people alive today. The less obvious impact is that the future population will be much older. Looking again at South Korea, by the end of the century, 45% of the population will be 65 or older, compared to 19% today and just 5% in 1990. There is no single reason for this decline. Rather, it is a number of different factors, both social and economic, which have over the past century chipped away at fertility rates year by year. Historically, children became economic contributors early on, assisting in farming and household labor, and most importantly, serving as investments for their parents' old age care. In pre-industrial societies, estimates suggest that 80 to 90% of elderly individuals relied on family, primarily their children, for care and support in old age. In contrast, in Western Europe and North America today, only 5 to 15% of elderly individuals rely on family for support, as most rely on state and private pensions instead. As technology has advanced and productivity has soared, the demand for higher education has increased. Young people now spend more time in school than ever before, delaying the age at which they enter the workforce and achieve financial independence. This postponement is not only costly for the parents, but leads young people to delay major milestones like starting a family. Unlike past generations, today's young adults are burdened by student debt, economic instability, and a diminished sense of readiness for parenthood. Many of those who do manage to establish themselves on the job market still find it difficult to gain financial independence because they often work at insecure and low-paying jobs. By the time they do feel ready for kids, they're already juggling demanding jobs and financial obligations. The choice to have children often comes with sacrifices to career advancement and financial security. This is particularly true for mothers. Studies show that after having children, women's wage growth often stalls, especially in high-paying fields. The higher the salary, the greater the cost of stepping away, even temporarily, from a demanding role. Challenges with work-life balance also deter potential parents. In countries with demanding work cultures, like Japan, long working hours leave little time for family life. In South Korea, the average worker puts in 1,900 hours annually, compared to around 1,500 hours in Germany. This lack of time, combined with insufficient parental leave policies and support for working parents, make raising children a daunting prospect. These pressures have greatly contributed to the shift that we have seen in many of the world's richest countries, where the primary period of childbearing went from early 20s to early 30s. All in all, the economic benefit of children to the average person has not only greatly diminished, but has been replaced with an ever-growing financial burden. But money is far from the only reason. After all, fertility rates have been declining since the 1960s, during some of the most economically prosperous times for many countries around the world. The 20th century brought enormous social change. Restrictions on contraception, divorce, and abortions loosened. As education levels rose and society opened up, priorities shifted. Overall, there was a growing acceptance of childlessness as a valid life choice. Suddenly, there were simply more ways people could spend their time. Many chose to focus on personal goals, embrace new experiences, and dive into the ever-growing consumer culture. Young people of today don't want to sacrifice their quote-unquote best years saddled with the responsibility of raising children. In the United States, the marriage rate has declined by nearly 60% since the 1970s, and the average age at first marriage has risen to nearly 30. This has reduced the number of stable partnerships in which children are usually born. What is particularly interesting is the disparity between the number of children people say they want and the number they actually have. In many low fertility countries across Europe and Southeast Asia, the ideal number of children often hovers around replacement level, yet actual fertility rates fall far below that. A study done in 2017 showed that whilst intended childlessness amongst women in Central and Eastern Europe was around 10%, actual childlessness reached between 20 and 25%. Today, many individuals find themselves childless not as a result of a conscious choice to avoid parenthood, but because the ideal conditions for having children either failed to align or came together too late. So what does this mean for the future? As mentioned earlier, the falling birth rates is leading to a rapidly aging population, especially in places like Europe, North America, and East Asia. In Japan, the median age is already over 48 years. With fewer young people and more elderly, the question becomes, how do we support an aging population with a shrinking workforce? In the next few decades, pensions and security systems are going to face some major challenges. These systems rely on young workers paying in to support retirees. But as the number of retirees swells and the number of contributors shrinks, these systems become unsustainable. Countries around the world are already feeling this pressure. In Germany, projections show that by 2035, there will only be 2 working age adults for every retiree, compared to 4 in 1995. In the UK, the government has warned that the state pension age might need to raise faster than expected to keep the system solvent. In Brazil, the pension deficit is already running at 2.6% of GDP and is projected to rise to 5.6% by 2060. Meanwhile, Japan's state pension fund, the largest in the world, has been forced to sell off assets to meet its obligations, raising concerns about its long-term viability. The implications of this pension crisis go beyond just financial solvency. They represent a fundamental shift in the social contract. Promise of a secure retirement, something that generations have taken for granted, is now at risk. This instability affects people's lives in profound ways. Younger generations are increasingly skeptical about whether pensions will even exist when they retire, leading to shifts in saving behavior and increased anxiety about the future. The erosion of trust in public pension systems can fray the social fabric, as people feel less confident in the institutions meant to support them. The rising retirement age also means that people will have to work for longer, potentially facing declining health and productivity, which could lead to a workforce that is both older and more fatigued. And speaking of health, the older a person is, the more expensive their healthcare becomes. For countries with public health systems like those in Europe, this will further increase the pressure on public finances and will likely result in more costs being passed down to the population or quality of the service worsening. An aging population will also impact our political systems. As people get older, they tend to become more resistant to change, favoring stability and the status quo, as the older you are, the more risk that change brings. This demographic shift could have significant political implications, with an older electorate less likely to support bold reforms or innovative policies, potentially stifling progress and exacerbating societal stagnation. This could lead to greater intergenerational tensions, as younger people feel burdened by the cost of supporting an aging population without the same assurances for their own future. Richer countries like the USA will likely be able to continue growing their populations in the next few decades. With a fertility rate of 1.6, this growth can only come from one source: immigration. However, it is far from a perfect solution. While it helps offset population decline in the short term, immigrants also age, which means that eventually we will face the same issue, only with an even larger elderly population to support. This cycle can lead to even greater demographic challenges down the line as the ratio of working age individuals to retirees continues to worsen. As populations decline globally, other countries will have strong incentives to curb emigration, especially since emigrants are typically younger people who are essential for maintaining a productive workforce. This could lead to the rise of more authoritarian regimes that impose restrictions on people leaving their country in the form of stricter border controls, heightened surveillance, and an erosion of individual freedoms. Public backlash towards immigration policies also pose a significant hurdle. We have seen the rise of political factions in both the USA and Europe that promise to curb immigration, making it a contentious and unreliable solution for long-term population growth. So where do we go from here? Influencing fertility rates on a meaningful scale is an enormous challenge for any government. One key reason is that fertility policies are often unpopular. Most people view reproduction as a personal choice, something the government has no business interfering with. And it's understandable, especially when you consider the history of fertility policies, which are often tied to eugenics, like forced sterilization in the US, or coercive measures, such as China's one-child policy. Despite decades of effort, governments around the world have struggled to reverse the trend. France now spends nearly 3% of its GDP on family policies each year. Sweden is known for its incredibly generous childcare and parental leave programs, which are among the best in the world. Singapore even offers cash bonuses for every child born, yet none of these countries have been able to stop the decline. At some point, we may need to accept that legislating our way out of falling birth rates is a lost cause. Instead, we need to refocus on adapting to this new reality. We have tackled booming populations in the past, so who's to say we can't adapt to the reverse? That's not to say that governments should entirely ignore fertility rates. Some key areas of improvement can still help to at least slow down the pace of decline, like increasing the availability of affordable homes for young families, or investing into alternatives for university, which can reduce the financial burden that many young people face today and get them into the workforce much earlier. With investments into technologies like artificial intelligence and robotics, humanity has a real chance to increase productivity enough to offset a shrinking workforce. While artificial general intelligence is far from certain, we've already seen current AI models bring significant benefits to businesses worldwide. This is where governments can step in, encouraging the safe development of these technologies and ensuring that economies adapt at a healthy pace. In the end, on a planet with finite resources, an endlessly growing population was never sustainable. Falling birth rates, while challenging, offer us a unique opportunity to recalibrate our path and mature as a species. With careful planning and innovation, this could lead to better times ahead. Thank you for watching. Any and all feedback is appreciated in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.